Should you be buying property at auctions? And if you do buy at auction, when is the best time to buy and when is the worst time to buy at auction? So my name's Simon Zutshi. In this property education, I'm going to spend all about how auctions work and how you can make them work for you. Now, I've been investing in property myself since 1995. I've been teaching other people like you how to become successful investors since 2003. And I've got thousands of people who I've helped replace their income over the last 2 decades, both in the UK and also internationally. So I kind of know a thing or two about property, but guess what? I'm still learning all the time. And what amazes me is that many investors, particularly when they're new, and sometimes experienced people, think the only way you can find a really good deal is going to a property auction. So what is a property auction? How do they work? And should you be using them? So first of all, let's talk about why someone might sell their property in an auction. There are fundamentally 3 reasons why someone might use an auction to sell a property. First of all, an auction is a very quick way of selling a property. When the hammer goes down on the day to the successful bid, that person will exchange contracts that day, and they generally have 28 days to complete. So if you're selling a property in an auction and it gets sold, you're going to get the money very, very quickly. That's one of the main reasons why people put properties into an auction. The second reason people put properties into an auction is that sometimes there's something wrong with the property, and the seller is counting on inexperienced investors who don't know what they're doing, who are looking for a bargain, coming and buying a property without doing their proper due diligence and research, and so buying what we call a dog or a lemon, which is basically a bad property. And you know this happens because very often you will have seen a property goes into an auction, it sells, and then a month or 2 later, the very same property comes back into the auction because the new buyer has realized they've made a big mistake. So just be careful. There are often problems with properties that are in auctions. They might have structural problems. They might have some sort of title issue. They might have some problems with their tenants. And those aren't reasons for not buying, but you just need to be fully aware of what the problems are and make sure that you can solve those problems. The third reason why someone might sell in an auction is because lots of people are coming to that auction looking for potential deals, and what happens is people sometimes get emotionally involved and they start bidding and often paying too much for that property. Particularly if they spent time and effort, they've spent some money with their solicitor overviewing the legal pack, they may have had a survey in the property, and they think, right, I want that property. And there's someone else, just one other person in the room who has that same view, and they get into a battle, and they've got this bidding battle, and eventually they go up and up and up, and someone usually ends up paying too much for that property. Now, sellers know that this is human nature, they know it happens, and they put a property into an auction to try and get a better price than they might if it was available on the open market. Because the whole point about the auction is competition. You either bid to get the property out or you miss out on that deal. I've been to lots of auctions and I've seen people pay more in an auction for a property than they could have bought it before the auction when it was listed with a normal estate agent. It was such a great deal, they should have bought it when they could have before the auction. So this is why actually I think auctions, although you can absolutely get some great deals at property auctions, I feel it's probably not the best strategy because there's lots of competition from other buyers. And I think there are better ways of finding people, maybe going direct to sellers before they even put the property into an auction. Having said that, there are 3 times at an auction when you can buy. The first time is before the auction. Now, when a property is listed with an auction house, it goes into a catalogue and they'll arrange a block viewing when a number of other investors can come round. This is a really good way for the seller and the auction company to judge how much interest there is in the property. Now, if there are not that many people coming round to the viewings before the auction, there might be an opportunity to approach the owner and make an offer before the auction. Now, in an auction, you always have what's called a guide price and you have what's called a reserve price. The guide price is what's put in the catalogue. They start the bidding at the guide price. People are expecting to get a nice cheap property, but they're never going to sell for the guide price. They almost always sell for more money, but only if the property reaches the reserve price. So the reserve price is the minimum that the owner is prepared to accept for that property. If it doesn't reach the reserve, it doesn't sell. If it goes beyond the reserve, somebody in the room will be buying that property on the day, and they've then got generally 28 days to complete. So if you want to buy property before the auction, you can put a bid in, and if the owner accepts it, they'll probably want you to exchange contracts before the auction and also complete under auction terms, normally the 28 days. Why? Well, they don't want someone saying, yeah, I'd like to buy the property, then messing around and not actually buying that property, and then they've missed the auction and missed the opportunity to sell the property. So they definitely want you to exchange before the auction and then complete in the normal 28 days. So before the auction is the first time you could actually buy a property. Then you've got on the day in the auction room. Now, in the auction room, you've got lots of other people there. By the way, I'm talking about physical auctions, which are different from the new modern form of auction, which I'll talk about later. But this is the traditional in-the-room auction, but you've got lots of other people competing for that property. And it might be that no one else is interested in buying that property, or no one else is prepared to spend as much as you're prepared to spend. So you might be successful in the bid. However, more often than not, there'll be other people there who maybe don't know as much as you, who maybe have more money than sense, and they often pay too much for those properties, which is why generally I think you don't really want to buy in the room on the day. A good tip, by the way, is if you see a property that is in a local auction house that is not in that area. So for example, there might be a London auction and there's a Birmingham property being sold in the London auction. Most of the people at the London auction are probably interested in just buying London properties. But if you're from Birmingham, obviously you want to buy Birmingham properties, it might be worth you going to that auction to bid because there might not be much competition. Now there's a service, a company called EIG Group. It's a subscription service where you can actually pay to get listings of all properties at all auctions throughout the UK. It's a few £100s, but it's a really good service if you definitely want to be buying from auctions. The third time you can buy in an auction is after the auction. Now imagine this. You've got a seller who's put their property into the auction because they want to try and get the best price, they want to try and sell it quickly, and yet it hasn't even sold in auction. That seller's going to be even more motivated. And whilst they might not have accepted created offers before the auction, if there are no other buyers lining up to buy this property, they might be far more open to creative strategies such as lease options, vendor finance, exchange delay completion, or anything like that. So buying after an auction can be a really good time to buy. However, more and more people are becoming aware of that. They're deliberately not bidding in the auction. They're just waiting to see if it doesn't sell. Then they're approaching the owner and the auction house. So those are the 3 times to buy in auction. Now let me explain the difference between the physical and the online modern version of an auction. So this is where estate agents say, I tell you what, we're going to do a modern auction on this property. They list a property for a certain guide price and they invite people to come and make offers. Normally there's a deadline and they'll take all offers up until that deadline, and when the deadline comes, as long as they hit a certain reserve, the person who's offered the most is the person who gets that deal. Again, I don't really like going to those. They probably don't have as much competition as in the room in a physical auction, but you don't know what other people are doing. You don't know if they're genuine offers or not. And it's just a bit of smoke and mirrors for me. So I don't really like the modern type of auction. I'm not saying you can't get deals in those, but I think it's a few more factors which you have no control over. So to summarize this video, although a lot of amateurs and professionals go to auction to buy properties, I think there are better ways of finding discounted properties. A few of those might be networking, word of mouth, finding out people who want to sell their properties, obviously using great software like Property Filter, which finds motivated sellers online, writing letters to existing HMO landlords. Now, obviously, that's a numbers game. Many are going to be very happy with their property, but you'll find a few, maybe 5%, who are not happy and want to get rid of their properties. And then, of course, working with local letting agents and estate agents with whom you have a good relationship, and when they get good deals coming to the market, maybe you could be the first person they call if you're in their little black book of contacts. So there are lots of ways of finding motivated sellers without having to go to auctions. If you do go to an auction, make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into. There's always a legal pack. You absolutely must get your solicitor to check the legal pack to make sure there's nothing untoward with this property. And also look at the special conditions, because sometimes it says things like, actually, we want you to complete within 14 days. It might say things like you need to pay the seller's fees. And often there's also an extra fee that the auction house charge that you have to pay as the buyer. So go in with your eyes wide open to make sure you understand what's happening. And of course, if you are successful in your bid, you're going to have to buy very, very quickly, within 28 days. Now that is a short period of time. You're not going to have long enough to arrange a normal mortgage. You either have to buy cash or you have to use bridging finance, which is possible to arrange in a very short amount of time, but you must have that lined up before you go to the auction. Otherwise, you're leaving things on a very, very tight time scale. And if you're late, if you don't buy that property, ultimately, the owner and the auction house can keep that 10% deposit you would have put down on the day of exchange. And also, if they sell the property at a loss, they can pursue you for the loss they've made. So you really must know what you're doing when you go to auction. Please do your due diligence and research beforehand and make sure you're ready to move very quickly. By the way, in the next video, I'm talking to you all about bridging finance and how that works. That's the type of finance you might use when buying at auction. So I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Put a comment below. What do you think about property auctions? Also, make sure you like this video and make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon so every time we come up with a new video, you'll be one of the first people to be notified. As ever, I encourage you to invest in knowledge, invest with skill.